the chairpersons of electoral management bodies, the commissioners and board members of electoral management bodies, distinguished guests. I'll present to you the experiences in the voter registration exercise that was conducted in Zambia in 2015 to the year 2016. The presentation will follow the outline in that I'll introduce voter registration. I'll talk about the rationale that was used to come up with the technology. I'll then talk about the implementation of voter registration itself and the numbers that we managed to register after the exercise. I'll talk about the register cleaning, the removal of duplicates from the register, but also the removal of the deceased from the register. I'll focus on the challenges and the successes that we recorded in this exercise. I'll then talk about the improvements that we would want to do to the process. As we know, voter registration establishes the eligibility of individuals to vote, to ensure that those who are eligible to vote can vote, but those who are not eligible should not vote. Any democratic election requires that a state compiles a reliable voter list, and that voter list will be used in an election for an election to be credible. The register to be used in an election has to be current, it has to be comprehensive, and that register has to aspire to the principles of data integrity and data protection. Voter registration itself comes along with a number of advantages in that the register can be used for the planning of various steps in the electoral cycle. So the delimitation, the division of the country into boundaries is helped by voter registration. The mobile campaigns, the education campaigns is influenced by the voter register. The election itself, the procurement of materials, the distribution of materials is also done using the voter register. The voter register encourages participation in that a voter who has got a national ID, a voter who has got a voter's card is more likely to participate in the matters of elections. It encourages transparency as it is a baseline for election results, but also we've heard that in other countries where they don't have a national ID, the voter's card has been used as a de facto national ID. The downside to voter registration is that it is usually very expensive, and we've heard from other presentations have attested to the fact that implementation of IT in elections is very expensive. The awareness exercises, the publicity, the procurement of technology, the procurement of EFIS, the automatic fingerprint identification system, and the procurement of the BVR kits is not cheap. Also, the downside is that it takes time to implement voter registration. When we look at our various electoral cycles, we'll be able to see that a huge chunk of that time is taken up by the voter registration exercise. Over the years, voter registration has been implemented in Zambia, and from 1964, since independence, the process was manual from 1964 to 2001. In 2006 and the year 2008, we used the OIMARA forms, which were filled in by the registration officers, and those forms were transported to a central location to the EZ headquarters, where that information was digitized And apart from that, the law required that the register and the voter's card should have a portrait of the voter, and for that reason, a Polaroid camera was used. Also used an ink pad to capture fingerprints of voters. Since 2010, we've used BVR to register voters. The reasons why we choose technology is the realization that to come up with a reliable voter list, to come up with an accurate voter list, a comprehensive list without the application of information and communication technologies is almost impossible in today's world. But what also influences the choice of the technology are the electoral reforms, the legal requirements, and in the Zambian scenario, the requirements included that the register should be permanent with a continuous voter registration. For one to vote, that person has to produce a national ID and a voter's card, and those factors have to be factored in the choice of technology. The immediate issuance of the voter's card. It was a requirement that the voter's card has to be issued immediately after registration, and the fact that we had to conduct strict duplicate checks to remove voter registrations which are duplicated, and BVR has got advantages to that fact. As I mentioned, the register in Zambia is a permanent register. So what we start with before registration is an existing register. To that register, we add new voters during voter registration, but also voters are able to update their details. They're able to transfer from one polling station to another, from one constituency to another. And during this period also, deceased voters are captured using the system where members of the public who have got information about the death of a voter and who have got evidence of that death can approach a registration officer and report that death. That death will then be captured in the system and will help in the removal of that voter from the voters' register. Once all those applications have been done and the voter registration exercise is finished, the data is then brought to a central location. The kits are brought to a central location where data is extracted, and that data is consolidated. Out of that, a provisional register is then produced and printed. The provisional register is then subjected to a public inspection by way of printing registers per polling station and distributing those registers to the respective registration centers, but also voters can verify their details using an SMS platform provided by the Electoral Commission of Zambia, and through the website of the Electoral Commission of Zambia, voters can verify their details. During this time, voters can also object to someone being on the register or make appeals to the commission according to the law. After this has been done, the data is again consolidated, and then that data is subjected to duplicate checks using EFIS and other methods. And then after that, the final register is then produced and certified for use in subsequent elections. The devices that we used included the laptop where the system was installed. It included a high-definition camera to capture portraits of voters. We had a fingerprint reader to capture the fingerprints of voters that were used to remove duplicates using EFIS. We had a USB for business continuity to help in a scenario where a laptop crashes. the system was automatically backing up all its information to a flash drive, and in a case where the laptop crashes, that flash drive could be used to restore information to another kit, and the voter registration officer could continue working as if the first kit did not crash. We had a printer to print out the voter's card immediately after registration, but also included in the kit was a battery, a lithium-ion battery that lasted 8 hours after being fully charged. The voter registration exercise was done using 2,000 kits, which covered the 7,700 registration centers in the Republic of Zambia. The deployment plan was done in a way that each registration officer with a kit should cover about 4 centers from September 2015 to December 2015. In that way, registration officers covered the 7,700 registration centers. Apart from that, there was a fixed center at the district where voters could register their details, whether voters could update their details, and those centers were open from September 2015 to March of 2016. In this exercise, Electoral Commission of Zambia utilized temporary staff as the commission is in the process of decentralizing its operations. The data processing was done by relational database management systems, the automatic fingerprint identification systems, but also the data was consolidated using the election information management system that is internally developed at the Electoral Commission of Zambia. The register was printed as printed lists and then distributed to the various polling stations and registration centers throughout the country. Sorry about the technological glitch. As I mentioned, the exercise was conducted from September 2015 to March of 2016. The mobile campaign happened from 2015 to December of 2015, and we registered the most voters in October of 2015. This was due to the fact that by this time, the mobile campaign was in full force and voters were more aware about the exercise. As I mentioned earlier, the register in Zambia is a permanent register, and the register before 2015 had about 5.17 million voters. The Central Statistical Office projected that would register 1.7 million voters, and we managed to register 90% of that target. This was a huge success of the exercise that we conducted. Apart from that, we managed to capture 1.6 million voter updates. Voters managed to update their details on the register, and that number stood at 1.66 million voters. The current register stands about at 6.7 million voters, composed of 50.35% females and 49.65% males. Before certification, the register was subjected to removal of duplicates using EFIS, but also using the national ID to detect duplicates. Then the register details were also used to look for potential duplicates. Whatever method was used was subjected to a two-level verification method, where one verification panel looked at the potential duplicates and compared the portrait, they compared the registration details, and made a decision whether a record was duplicated or not. Whatever decision that they came up with was subjected to a second panel that made a final decision on a duplicate case. We managed to remove 112,000 voter registration records as duplicated. We also removed the deceased from the register using the software that had a component of removal of death, but also we interacted with the civil registry department, and from the National Pension Scheme, we got data that helped in the removal of the deceased from the register. The numbers that we managed to remove in this exercise stood at 62,907 voters as deceased voters. The register looks like what is shown on the screen there. We've got a portrait and other details for easy identification of voters during voting. We recorded a number of successes in this exercise, in that a credible register was produced, a register that is in use even today. That register was subjected to an independent audit, and the audit exercise added to the credibility of the register. We managed to capture over 90% of the voting population, and this, as I said, was a huge success. We removed 112,000 duplicated voter records. We trained over 2,000 registration officers for the exercise, and because of these factors, the register was not disputed. We used a very user-friendly software, and this software helped enhance the capability of voter registration officers who managed to register a lot of voters in a short period of time. We also had a few challenges here and there. One of the challenges that we faced related to the fingerprints of some voters. Some of our citizens do manual labor, and because of that, we had challenges capturing their fingerprints. A few voters, we had challenges in that aspect. Also, the time that it takes to run a full EFIS, to do human action on the results of EFIS, but also to look at the objections and appeals from the voters took time. But the other challenge that we had was synergizing with the Civil Registry Department, because the Civil Registry Department also do their own exercise of registering citizens and issuing national IDs to citizens. The national ID is a requirement for someone to be registered as a voter, but in certain areas, the Civil Registry Department only went to those areas after the voter registration exercise in that area had finished. In that way, some voters were disadvantaged. We'd want to make a number of improvements to the system, and the first improvement that we'd want to do is to make the voter's card to expire in 10 years, and this will help us remove obsolete records, or even the records of the deceased would automatically come out of the register if the voter's card expires in 10 years. We would want to extract data from a variety of sources, from the Civil Registry Department, as they are currently computerizing, and this will help us make sure that our register is as accurate and is as current as possible. The kit should be able to capture 10 fingerprints, and would want to join other EMBs who have already gone this route. On the update, apart from the other requirements that we already require for one to update, we would want to improve our system to be able to capture the fingerprints to be used in the update process. Would also want to improve on the engagement with other organizations like hospitals, the district councils who issue burial permits, the Department of National Registration who are mandated to record deaths, the traditional leaders who keep village lists, and those lists can be used to remove deceased voters according to the legal framework. In concluding, I would like to say that the technology should be informed by the various legal requirements of a particular country and the stakeholder expectations that are available in a country, and also the system user requirements. In concluding, as I said, technology should answer to objectives and never should it drive the objectives. Thank you very much.